Probably the number one thing that people get most confused by is the measurements. It's not that complicated. So basically there's 5 sets of measurements, and we're going to pretend that below this 2-inch grade ring is the top of the manhole, okay, either the cone or the flat top or whatever. That's going to be the structure.
Okay.
So from a measurement standpoint, you want to measure the inside diameter of the casting right at the very bottom. So in this case it's roughly 24 1/4, and you don't need to get super critical measurements here. Just within 1/8 or 1/4 of an inch is going to be close enough. Then you want to measure any grade rings, diameter of those grade rings, and in this case it's 24.
Okay.
Then you want to measure the diameter of the cone or the flat top. The inside diameter 24 inches. So you've got those 3 dimensions. The D1 is the frame, 24 1/4. C1 is the chimney diameter, the grade ring diameter was 24, and C2 is the cone, and so that was also 24. The other 2 measurements are the distance from the bottom of the frame to the top of the manhole cone. In this case it's about 3 1/4 inches. That's called our H1 dimension. H2 is going to be the height on the cone or the flat top. And in this case, this happens to be about 8 inches. It might be 4, it might be 3. Various cones, flat tops, they all have different heights. But we need to know if that's present. Some manholes don't even have that. So we may not be able to connect the seal to the cone if that's not present. Especially if it's an eccentric cone where you have a straight side and a sloping side. If it's concentric where it's tapered all the way around, we actually have a seal that will work in that configuration. We don't sell a lot of them. It's a pretty rare thing. But so in most cases, those are the dimensions that we need. So when we ask somebody to get us the measurements, that's what we're talking about. When somebody says, I need a 24-inch seal for this, you know, we want to get those measurements. That way we can be assured that the person's going to get the right seal and the right bands. Sometimes the casting's bigger. It might be 26. But if the cone and the rings are 24, we need to give them a 24-inch seal, but with a 26-inch top band, and then we just stretch that rubber out.
Okay.
So we can deal with those diameter differentials, but if we don't know they're present, then we give them the wrong product, and then it causes a problem in the field. So, so those are the measurements. And then so for this manhole, we would have either a standard width classic seal or a 0 to 6 LSS seal would work in this application. Because there's only 3 1/2 inches of grade rings, or 3 1/4. A standard classic will cover about 4 1/2 vertical inches, and a 0 to 6 will cover what it says, 0 from no rings to up to 6 inches of rings.
What's more expensive?
In that size, they're both the same cost.
Are they?
The difference in price starts to come in the wider, the 6 to 12 and the 12 to 18 and 18 to 24 LSSs. There becomes some economies to the end user and the contractor using the LSS versus the classic seals that would normally take extensions and extra pieces. It becomes a lot easier to install and more economical to use the LSS seal once you get beyond that 6 inches.
I see.
Actually 4 1/2 inches. So so from a product labeling standpoint, again, so you know what you have, this one is we're used a 0 to 6 LSS, so all of our seals have it imprinted on the seal.
The other one will say classic.
Well, I would say actually STD, standard, not sexually. You're not getting this on video, are you? Sexually transmitted disease. So it would be, you know, so and if it was a 6 to 12, it would say 24 6 to 12, or if it was a 26, it would be a 26 6 to 12 or whatever. And then the classics would be standard.
T1.
It says T1 standard, T1 wide, and then T1 XX wide. So those are the 3 profiles. And then the extensions are all labeled 24 by 7, 24 by 10, for the height, and again, the labeling's pretty straightforward. Okay. On the bands, all the bands are stamped in the same location, just inside of this single slotted side. The tool slot is going to have our name, the patent number, and the part number, product number, and the size. So that's our part number, and the size is 24 inch. Okay. Now, 24 inch is kind of a nominal thing. The bands actually have, through this adjustment area, 2.5 inches of adjustment. So the way the bands overlap from size to size is it'll go an inch below and 1.5 inches above the size. So a 24 inch band will go from 23 to 25.5.
Okay.
And then so a 26 inch band would start at 25 and go to 27.5. So there's always a 1/2 inch cushion. There should never be a situation where we can't give them a band that will work. Okay. Because there's overlap through all the sizes. Okay. So in most cases, you know, in your area, most people know what they need. Yep. A lot of 26 inch seals up in Minnesota as far as internals go. Okay. Okay. Procedures, as we were talking about, sometimes the seal, you can pop it open and it'll stay in, or other times it won't. This should pop open and stay in place. Okay. So we'll start with that, and then we'll go through the lubricating the bands and how to insert the bands. I'll do the first one and you can do the second one. So kind of like I showed you yesterday in the presentations, the easiest way to get these into the manhole is to just take the seal and fold it. Keep in mind, you always want the lettering facing up.
They're starting to come with this side up.
Yeah, all the classics already did. Now the LSSs do. So, because there is a very slight taper on this, because most castings actually have a very slight taper on them to allow the pattern, to allow the casting off of the pattern. So that's pretty common. So that's why it's critical. And then the bottom side is just straight for a vertical surface. So the seal goes, you pop it into the manhole, and then you pop it open and push it into place. Now this one's a little loose, so you know, if this was a real manhole, we'd want to make sure that somebody was holding on to this so it didn't fall down into the manhole. Now as far as placement, you want the top part of the seal to be in the lower, generally to be in the lowest 3 inches of the casting. If you got a taller casting, you don't necessarily want to pull it up because you want to maximize the coverage ability of the seal. Okay. Sometimes it doesn't matter. Like in this case, we've got an extra, about 3 inches to play with height-wise, so we can put this thing anywhere we want on the casting, and we'll still land on the bottom cone part of this mock-up. Okay. So that's kind of where you want to position the seal. So now for the bands,
lube that baby.
We're going to use the lube, and all of our seals come, with a little tube of lube. Generally, about 4 to 6 seals per tube. Yep. You don't need to, like we talked about pipe gasket lube, you just
nickel size
put a little bit, like that is about all it takes. And then you can take the band and just take that material and spread it, as fairly uniformly as you can around the outside of the band. Just so there's just a light coating on there. Now you can either do the next band so it's ready to go, or we can put the first band in, which is what I'm going to do now because I want you to do the other one. Now to put these in, there's a couple different ways that they can go in. One way is to just kind of take it and corkscrew it down in here like this. The other way, which is the way I prefer to do it, is to just kind of collapse the band onto itself. Okay. And hold it, and then drop it down into the manhole opening, and then let it slowly spring open like that.
Okay.
And you want to obviously position it in that band track on the top part of the seal. And the tool is going to connect into these oval slots. So one side goes there, the other side goes there. You'll be able to spin this out till it starts to get a little snug by hand. And again, you want to make sure that you've got this thing up on your frame where it needs to be. Okay, and this is a 1/2-inch drive ratchet with a 15/16 socket. I recommend a 6-point socket because you get better grip than with a 12-point socket on the nut. So now as you tighten this out, you're starting to compress the rubber.
Right.
And you don't need to go super fast here. This is just a gradual, nice, easy tightening. It's going to start to feel pretty tight. And then we recommend that you let the seal kind of relax for about 30 seconds. This will allow you to just check and make sure that it's where it needs to be. It's in the band restraint, everything looks right. And then you can usually, and you're going to be putting a fair amount of force on here, get it to the next set of open slots. And then slowly, because you want to make sure that those two tabs both drop into that slot. And then back off the tool, and that's it. In and tight. So I will have you do the lower band.